Hello, hello. Today we're going to talk about the art of receiving compliments. I hear people say all the time that they don't know how to respond when someone gives them a compliment, they don't know how to accept it, they feel super awkward, and it makes what otherwise would be a really pleasant, joyful experience something that feels super uncomfortable. And I get it. I'm super awkward sometimes accepting compliments too, but I want to share today some strategies to help improve our ability to accept compliments, why that matters, and how you can use this to gain some valuable insight about yourself and your own blind spots. So stay tuned for all of that. But first, one thing that historically people have complimented me on is my writing, which I am very grateful for. And because of that encouragement from other people, I recently published my first book. It's a collection of poems along with some personal reflections and nonfiction, self-helpy, inspirational type stuff. It is called Create and Receive, Make and Believe, Finding Peace Through Primarily Positive Poetry. You can check that out in the link in the video description. So, if you find it challenging to accept compliments, there are probably a few things going on, but most people either feel unworthy of receiving the compliment in the first place, they don't believe it's true, or a big one for most people that feel this way is they don't want to feel like they're coming across as arrogant or overly confident, or if someone gives them a compliment, it's better to deflect it. A lot of times we're actually taught to deflect compliments because we're told that that's polite. And I know that in some cultures, that is considered the social norm, and it's actually considered very rude to accept a compliment. I remember reading a novel in elementary school, and I think the main character was from Thailand, but I don't remember exactly. But I believe it was an Asian country, and she was commenting on how American girls, when someone said, "Oh, you're so pretty," American girls would say thank you. And in her culture, she was taught, like, do not acknowledge that they're correct. Do not say thank you. You deflect it and say, "No, I'm not," or whatever. I'm not sure how they were told to deflect it, but deflect it in some way. So with all of that being said, please bear in mind I am coming from the United States. I am sharing what is considered comfortable and socially acceptable in the United States. So if this goes against your cultural values and is not something you want to change, stop the video. You don't have to listen, but really it's meant to help us develop our own self-awareness around why we feel so uncomfortable receiving compliments and ways that we can interact with other people that will make it feel more comfortable, even if you don't necessarily believe the compliment's true. So first of all, let's acknowledge how it feels to compliment someone else. When we give someone else a genuine compliment, usually it feels really good to make someone else feel good. And that's not necessarily why we're doing it. We're not complimenting them so that we can feel better about ourselves, but it is a nice bonus. So if I tell someone, "Oh my gosh, you did an amazing job," and I see their reaction of like, "Oh my gosh, thank you for saying that. Like, that really means a lot." That makes me feel really good. And it makes the discomfort of going out of my way to compliment them worth it. And this is something I've actively trained myself to do more often. And even though this video is mostly about receiving compliments, it's important, I think, to think about why people give compliments and to reflect on your own ability to give other people compliments. And here's something I'll share. If you've been following me or seen my other videos, you know my mom has been very sick for a very long time. At one point, probably about 5 years ago, she was in the hospital. She thought it was the end. She literally thought she was about to die. And she said she had specific memories pop up from times when she either didn't thank someone or didn't tell someone she liked something about them. So essentially, she didn't give them a compliment. And it was very specific, and she would tell me like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't tell Nick thank you for the bread," or something like that. And she said ever since then she's gotten so generous with complimenting people, complimenting strangers. And she knows now if she sees someone out and about in public complimenting someone, she'll ask them, like, did you have cancer? She did that one time. We were at a store, we were at Dillard's, which is a department store, and this woman just complimented her shirt. And my mom asked her, like, did you have some sort of terminal illness? And the woman said yes. And she had had cancer. And ever since having cancer, she just started being very free with her compliments. And therefore, this is something that at the end of life, we will regret not doing. And so why wait till then? Why wait till you get cancer to start complimenting people? It feels so good to help other people feel good. So practice that. But the point of this video is about taking in those compliments. But when we think about the person giving us the compliment, we want to make it a positive experience for them. So let's say some stranger who's just battled cancer and is out and about for her first time sees your shirt that you're wearing and says, oh my gosh, I love your blouse. And you say, oh, I hate it. It looks so bad on me. We're kind of taking away her moment. We're not letting her get the joy and satisfaction of giving us the compliment. And when we graciously accept the compliment someone's giving us, one, it'll help us feel better. And we'll talk about that side of things in just a moment. But first, we're thinking about the perspective of the other person. It will make them feel so much better if they get to give it to you. Just like if you give someone a present and they don't receive it well, it's not as rewarding or fulfilling to give the present. If they don't appreciate it, if they don't say thank you, we're less inclined to give them more presents because we're like, they're not validating my need for appreciation. Whether that's good or bad or right or wrong is a whole other discussion. Spiritual perspectives would say we shouldn't need that validation, but we're human and most of us want that. And so even at a subconscious level, if someone doesn't appreciate what we're doing, we're less inclined to do that more. And so when we don't receive well what someone is giving us, we're taking away that person's ability to feel good about that experience. Or we're diminishing it in some way because we're not receiving what they're trying to give. And so we can help them have a better experience by accepting the compliment, which will then encourage them to give more compliments. Because if, for example, let's say you've tried complimenting people before and then people think you're creepy or they think it's weird or they're like, well, that's odd, why'd you tell me that? You're going to stop complimenting people. And that's no good. That's no fun. Why would you want to do that? So if we want to encourage the world to be encouraging and supportive and complimentary of other people and to give freely, part of our responsibility is to accept so that we keep that cycle going. Now, also, if someone gives you a compliment, or rather, think about you're giving someone a compliment and the person deflects it. Not only does it now not feel rewarding because they haven't appreciated it, but now we're actually putting the onus on the complimenter to make us feel better. So for example, if I say, oh my gosh, you did a fabulous job in your presentation, and the person I'm saying that to says, oh, no, I didn't. I made a mistake here and I didn't like how I sounded on this part and oh, I'm so nervous. Now I feel obliged to take care of their feelings. Now I instinctively feel like I need to say, oh no, it was great. It was good. No, you didn't mess up. Like you did amazing. And now I have to work extra hard to make them feel better, which I don't mind doing. I'm happy to do that. But when we think about what happens when we deflect that person's compliment, we're really putting our emotions, we're making it their responsibility, ultimately. Even if we don't consciously expect that, if someone says, oh, I really like your dress, you look good, and I say, oh, I feel so fat, and they don't tell me that I don't look fat, I might take it personally, and that's not really fair to them. Because my expectation by saying, oh, I look so fat, is that they would say, oh, no, you don't. No, you don't. Which, again, not saying this is correct or that we should be doing those things, but I'm just saying what often happens in people's psyches. That is then self-deprecating. We're putting responsibility on the other person to make us feel better. And even if you say, no, I'm not, I don't expect them to assure me, they're going to feel that. They're going to feel called to make you feel better. And if they don't, great. But most people, probably if you're listening to this and you have trouble accepting compliments, you're probably a very kind and empathetic person to begin with. So you're probably the type of person who's going to go out of your way to make that person feel better. So then we've taken what could have been a really positive, easy experience and made it something awkward, made it something uncomfortable, and made it so the other person now has to make us feel even better. So again, a simple example would be if I say, oh, I love your haircut, and you say, oh my gosh, I hate it, it looks so bad, I don't like how it turned out, then now I have to say, oh no, it looks great, what do you not like about it? I really think it looks great, and I have to then assure you even further that it's good. Versus if we accept the compliment and we say, thank you. Now I feel good because I pointed out your haircut. I'm like, oh, you have a nice haircut. And you say, thanks. And it made you happy and it made me happy. Win-win situation. So let people complimenting you have their moment, let them enjoy it, and let yourself enjoy it. So now comes the question of, well, how do I feel worthy of compliments? First of all, give yourself permission to accept what someone is complimenting you on, because you're not reading their mind. Maybe you don't like your haircut, but they genuinely do. Let them like your haircut. It's not up to you to be in their head and decide their opinion of you. If they like it, let them like it. You don't have to like it, but you can acknowledge that they like it and say thank you or accept the compliment. So give other people permission to form their own opinions. And if they tell you a positive opinion about you, give yourself permission to receive it. And even if you don't believe it right away, if you feel some resistance, this is where compliments and being attentive to the things people comment on about you can be a really insightful, reflective exercise for our personal growth and development. So if someone gives you a compliment and you don't necessarily believe it, you don't have to deflect it. You can take it in and then flag it to think about later and think, why did I not feel comfortable when they told me I did a good job on my presentation? You can accept it in the moment and then go back and reflect later on what you feel you could have done better, why you feel like that compliment wasn't deserved or whatever, and then work on your own worthiness wounds and blocks to feel okay receiving that compliment. But you don't have to say it in the moment. Now, sometimes it's appropriate if you're talking to someone who's really close to you and they're like, oh, you did a great job, how are you feeling? You can say, well, actually, I don't love how I did XYZ, but you can accept the compliment first. And I'm going to give some examples of how to accept compliments, so don't worry, but right now it's just being okay taking it in. And if you feel that resistance come up, know that you don't necessarily have to voice that to the other person, because then again, it makes that other person feel responsible for taking care of you, which isn't really fair because they were trying to say something nice. So you want to question, why is this resistance coming up? And just use that as intel, use that as information. And what I'm going to suggest doing also is write down every compliment that you receive, every nice thing that someone says about you, because you'll start to notice patterns and you'll start to notice, wow, a lot of people complimented my hair this week. Maybe my haircut isn't so bad after all. And maybe you already love your hair and people are complimenting it. Write it down anyway. And this can be a really helpful tool, one, to build confidence. I did a whole video about why we should keep a compliment book, and I will link that here, so check that one out. It's like 30 minutes long, but basically the meat of it is write down and track every compliment you receive, because it builds our confidence. because it helps us realize the way we're coming across to other people. It helps us understand what people notice about us, what people love about us. And by writing it down and keeping track of it, we can build our self-esteem so that on those days when we really hate ourselves and we really think, oh my gosh, I have nothing to offer this world, you can go back to that list and remember all the nice things people have said about you, and it will keep you going. Trust me, I use this all the time in my own life when I'm feeling really depressed, or I'm like, what's the point of me being here? You know, I've done some videos that are a little sad in that sense, but referencing my list of, I call the document on my computer Pretty Compliments to Remember, it really lifts me up. Sometimes I'll just go through my YouTube comments on the sweet ones and be like, okay, yeah, let me keep going with this channel. Let me keep going with my Instagram, because people saying nice things is how other people stay afloat. We need that to some degree. Maybe some people don't, but I certainly do. And my guess is you do too, unless you're a totally enlightened spiritual master. So keeping track of it will not make you arrogant, because you're going to be grateful. For every compliment you receive, you want to be genuinely, genuinely grateful. And this, even in your interaction, if you don't believe what you're hearing, instead of deflecting it, be grateful that that person thinks it and that they went out of their way to say it. Because it's not always comfortable complimenting someone else. They went out of their way to say something nice to you. Whether you believe it or not, it's okay to be grateful. And it's good to be grateful and to say thank you. Saying thank you doesn't necessarily mean you're agreeing with them that you're beautiful. You're just saying thank you for saying that. Which is a common one that you can say if you don't necessarily agree with them or you feel uncomfortable. A really poised way, a really graceful way to accept a compliment is to say thank you for saying that. That way you're not going to come across as arrogant. You're just like, oh, thanks, I know. Say thank you for saying that. I really appreciate it. This is one I actually saw a video about Taylor Swift, and she does that a lot. She always says thank you for saying that, because, well, I don't know why, probably just because it's smooth and it comes across really well, and it comes across as pretty humble, as opposed to, yeah, I know, thanks. So that's a really good phrase you can use. Some other phrases you can use would be just a simple thank you, and smile. Sometimes people feel awkward if it's thanks, and then it's silence, and they're like, what do I do now? So some options there. You can say, thank you, that means a lot to me. Or thank you, that's so sweet, I really appreciate you saying that. Or before saying thank you, have a reaction like, oh, that's so kind, thank you. But you want it to be genuine. So don't practice rehearsing these, if it's not true. You want to be genuinely grateful. But the first step is to feel gratitude for the compliments that you receive, and feel gratitude for the person going out of their way to say it. So then you're not going to be forcing a thank you. You're not going to be following a script. You're going to be genuinely grateful and say, oh, thank you. And writing it down will reinforce that, because every time you write it down and you read the list, you're going to feel grateful, tap into that gratitude, like, oh my gosh, all these people have gone out of their way to say something nice for me. Amazing. But anyway, so I know I'm going back and forth a little bit here between the psychology of it and the practical tools, but other phrases that you can use or things that you can do in the moment. Personally, what I really like to do, or I found myself starting to naturally do, is accept the compliment, and then you can comment on what they've said. So instead of just landing with an awkward silence, like, oh, where do we go from here? You can say, thank you, and then comment about it. So for example, if someone says, I love your shirt, I would say, thank you, my mom gave this to me for my birthday. Ta-da! And then they might start talking about my mom, or they might start talking, oh, when's your birthday? Or you did an amazing job on your presentation. Say, oh, Thank you. I was super nervous. I'm glad it's over. I have been working on it for about a week. And that's going to keep the conversation going, as opposed to just going straight into the self-deprecation and the other person has to make you feel better, or just saying thank you, full stop. So comment on it, and you can share a little bit about it. You can share about what they're complimenting you on. You can ask a question. So if it's something like, oh, wow, I read your book and I loved it, you can ask the question. You say, oh, I really appreciate you saying that. What stood out to you about it? Or what did you love the most? Or I would love to hear your opinion about XYZ. So you can keep the conversation going so that it doesn't put so much attention on you and the compliment, because that feels uncomfortable sometimes. And it'll keep the flow of conversation going so that it's just a compliment, boom, and then you just keep the flow going. It doesn't have to be something awkward. You can also respond by acknowledging something about that person that you want to give them a compliment on. So for example, if someone says, oh, you look great, you could say, oh, thanks, you too. But only do that if you mean it. Okay, so sometimes if you jump straight into complimenting the other person, it feels forced. For example, I was at a bookstore recently and someone complimented my jewelry. She said, oh, I like the combination of your jewelry. I said, thank you. And then I just paused and I thought I should compliment her jewelry. And she wasn't wearing jewelry. So I'm glad I didn't, because that would have been a lie. That would have been me saying, oh, I like your jewelry too, which wouldn't have been true because she didn't have jewelry on. And so walking out of the store, I realized I could have complimented her makeup, because I really, before we even chatted, I had noticed her eye makeup was really beautiful, but it didn't come to me in the moment. And so you want to make this genuine, and the more comfortable you get, the more fluid it'll be, and the more likely you'll be able to think quickly on the spot and say, oh, thank you for saying that. I like this jewelry combination too. Also, I was noticing your eyeliner before I walked up here, and I think it looks really great. Great, win, win, win. But you don't need to respond to a compliment with a compliment to the other person, because you want to be comfortable accepting compliments for yourself. Now, the other thing that keeping track of your compliments can do, and the whole impetus actually for me recording this, I've been wanting to record this video for a while, but I had a comment on a video the other day that was about how do I find my purpose. And one of the things I suggested was reflect on what people compliment you on. Because if someone else sees something in you that you may not see in yourself, and you're open to believing that it's true, that can provide enormous insight into your strengths, into how you come across in the world, and really into what people appreciate about you. But if we're constantly deflecting our compliments and we don't accept them and we just believe that's not true, that's not true, that's not true, we're missing some very valuable information. Remember, we don't know how we come across to other people, because we can't objectively be in someone else's body and see the way we come across. We can't feel our own energy. We cannot hear our own voice the way someone else hears it. And so we have to go on what they're telling us, and we have to believe that it's true. Sometimes people lie, sometimes people make stuff up, and use your intuition here, but most of the time people are complimenting you because they feel it and they think it and they believe that. So trust it. And when you write these down, you'll start to notice patterns, like I was saying before, but you can use those patterns to help you know yourself better. For example, this was so powerful for me. I always considered myself super shy and super awkward. And then my boss, I was maybe 24 years old, maybe even younger, but I was an intern, and my boss just casually in a meeting was like, oh, Trisha, because you're so good with people, da-da-da-da-da. And I was like, I'm good with people? What? Like, I had no idea that anyone would think that I'm good with people. I was like, in my head, no. I'm good with little kids. I'm decent with animals. But adults, peers, I'm not good. I'm super socially awkward. But him saying that, and he wasn't going out of his way to compliment me. It was just embedded in this casual conversation. He said it so nonchalantly, like obviously Trisha's good with people. And I had no idea. And that was huge for me because it probably changed the trajectory of my life. I thought I was going to work in a school with little children, and I love working with kids, but I ended up working with adults. And part of why I felt confident enough to do that is because of what he said. He was like, "You're so good with people." And he probably has no idea that flippant little comment he made affected me so strongly. And so instead of immediately deflecting it in my mind of like, that's not true, I felt the resistance. And then later I reflected on it and I'm like, yeah, maybe I am okay with people. Maybe I'm pretty good with people. And I started to look for evidence to prove that to be true. And then I started recalling other times people had given me similar comments that maybe I deflected or brushed away, or as I got those comments moving forward, I took them seriously. And so you have no idea what you might be missing by not accepting compliments or immediately feeling awkward and trying to deflect them. Take an inventory of all the nice things people say about you, and you might be surprised. And don't assume that people know about themselves the thing that you think is obvious. Again, my boss thought it was so obvious that I was good with people. That was news to me. And if he hadn't said that, I may never have known. And so we can think that about that, especially when we're giving other people compliments. We tend to not compliment people who we assume already know that about themselves. Like, you may meet a supermodel and say, "Oh, you're gorgeous," but you probably assume that supermodel hears she's gorgeous all the time, so you may or may not actually say it. That's kind of a superficial example. But when it comes to people's personalities and energies and things like that, you may not realize that that person has no idea that they're beautiful or that they have a good energy or whatever. And I keep coming back to energy because I think that's something that a lot of people have told me, especially in the past year, just casually of like, "Oh, you have such a sweet energy," or "You have such a good energy." And I'm like, what does that mean? Like, I can't feel my energy. Like, I don't know what that means. And so I just take it in and I'm just learning to accept it, say that's great. People think that. I'm assuming they're not lying to me because what would their motivation be to lie to me about it? And so use those little clues from other people and write it down. Again, write it down and keep it all in one place so that you can keep a running list. Maybe it's a note on your phone, maybe it's a Word document, maybe it's a physical journal. And again, I'll link the video to the compliment book that really belabors this point. But that'll help you start to feel more comfortable accepting the compliments. And then in the moment, you just say thank you. If you don't feel gratitude for the compliment itself because you don't believe the compliment, thank you for saying that. Be grateful that the person is saying it. So that's a really powerful reframe to get over the awkwardness. You're not necessarily saying thank you for the compliment. You're saying thank you for the person, to the person for going out of their way to give you the compliment. Does that distinction make sense? I hope so. Then you can comment on the compliment to keep the conversation going. You can reciprocate with another compliment, just make sure it's genuine. And you can also train yourself to get really good at complimenting other people by being really observant and noticing things about people and pointing them out when you notice them, because the more comfortable you are giving compliments, the more comfortable you're likely to be receiving them. And give yourself permission to take it in. Give yourself permission to accept the compliment, and give other people permission to have their beliefs and ideas. Because again, if someone says, "I like your hat," and you say, "This is a stupid hat," you're like basically saying their opinion doesn't count or their opinion doesn't matter. If someone says, "You're a really kind person," and you say, "No, I'm not because I did XYZ," you're essentially saying their opinion is invalid. That's kind of rude. And you're not coming from a bad place. Most of the time we deflect compliments from our own insecurities, but when we reframe and think about how it affects the other person, one, it essentially invalidates their opinion, says you're not allowed to have your opinion. And two, again, like we said in the beginning, it's going to potentially make them feel like they have to then make you feel better. Say, no, it's a really great hat. And who has time for all that? Who wants to do that? So we can make it a smoother experience all around by accepting compliments gracefully. And then one other quick little note is I noticed when I was doing the compliment book video and talking about this with clients and people, men are less likely to get compliments on average than women. So if you're a dude and you're listening to this and you're like, no one compliments me ever, don't take it personally. You might not get a compliment 10 times a day. You might not even get one compliment a day. You might get one a week, maybe less than that. Doesn't matter, men or women. If you're not getting compliments, it's not that people aren't thinking nice things about you. It's that they probably feel awkward giving compliments, which is why we want to make it easier for everybody by accepting them when you do get them, which will inspire more people to give compliments and receive them. You see how this just kind of works into a nice cycle of giving and receiving and complimenting and accepting. So if you feel like you're not getting a lot of compliments, start complimenting other people more often and just see how that feels. So I hope all of this was helpful. If you enjoyed it, you might be interested in my online course called Show Up Sure: Secrets to Embody Confidence for a Lifetime. This is an adjunct practice that you can do along with a lot of the other practices that I share in the course. There's a money-back guarantee. It's on sale right now, or it's for sale right now for $27.99. You can find the link to that in the video description. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and go give someone a compliment. Thanks.